We will now be joined by Kenneth Kwamina Thompson. You know him popularly as Ken Thompson. He's fellow Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales and former Chief Executive Officer, Dayles Finance. My guests who have been with us here already, Dr. John Osai Kwapong, Democracy and Development Fellow, CDD Ghana, Richard Ahiagba, Director of Communications of the NPP, Godfrey A. Bopkin, Professor of Economics and Professor of Finance at the University of Ghana. And now I'll share just a couple of your messages with you, and then we proceed. The K. Amwa says that the NDC should sustainably fix the looming power crisis, just like they have started tackling the Cedi issue. We, the voters, are watching closely. Hashtag Newsfile, hashtag JoyNews. Pray for Ghana says, so in all the issues of Ghana's power crisis, we know John Mahama established ESLA to forestall this same challenge we are facing today. My question, however, is what exactly did ex-President Akufo-Addo do in that sector to help us in 8 years? Daniel W.Y. Asari, ECG's problem is structural, compounded by the politicians who directly or indirectly are benefiting from the situation. Unless we get a private participation, nothing will change. The last time we got private participation, you know what it took us to? Collins Little Tete says the government has the tools to avert a crisis, but history and structural challenges raise doubts. Success depends on moving beyond partisan fixes to a national energy policy, prioritizing renewable and grid modernization over expensive thermal plants. Our governments are, procurement oriented. That's where they get their gigs. That's where they build the war chest for the next election. And that's what they think, Abdullah Pegla Issa says that almost all panelists have been, sleeping under darkness. And if any of them decide to slide their own experience under the carpet and praise this failing administration, it's your problem. John Mahama experienced doomso when he visited WA. Okay, thank you. I think it's a guy I'm familiar with on social media. It's like overnight, the NPP seem to see everything wrong. All the things we saw wrong, we spoke about, they never saw. But, well, it's good. We need opposition to hold them accountable. Citizen Kwesi Hornsby says 40% transmission loss undermines revenue mobilization. There is a need for an audit. There's a need for an audit of the entire value chain from upstream to downstream. Government institutions must be made to pay their own electricity usage. Illegal connection is a serious threat and must be tackled. Thank you. Electricity, dear. People want it, provided they'll pay. That's all they want. So let's get to the Cedi and how it's beginning to get the ratings globally as doing very well. When only how many years ago it took us to junk status. Let's hear a couple of the comments that have been made, including by the president himself, before we get to this.
I can say on authority that as a community of banks, we do not have any directive that bars over-the-counter withdrawal of USD or any foreign currency. You cannot just show up in a bank and withdraw foreign currency. There must be a legitimate justification or reason in support of that withdrawal. Perhaps it's something that we are not within the purview, and we do not want to even begin a discussion of such matter.
Right. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, the sound from the president is failing us. And I want to apologize to Harriet too. I understand that she wanted to say something finally before we move on to this topic. But here we are. So we have some slides. I want you to see the magic the Cedi has been performing. Just to juggle your mind, remind you to pinch yourself and check whether this is a dream or is reality. Okay, so let me start again right from the studio and ask that question. Is this a blip? Is this sustainable?
Well, it's not a blip. And again, there are concerns about sustainability. There is a reason for what is happening. So it's not purely accidental. From the 2025 budget, you could see that government's intention was to stabilize the economy. Okay. The economy was overheated. So there were three things they announced in the budget: a shock therapy, expenditure-based fiscal consolidation that shrinks expenditure considerably. And in nominal terms, you could see compared to 2024, total expenditure for 2025 went down in nominal terms by more than 10 billion. See this. Then, from the monetary policy side, and I want to commend the Minister of Finance and the Governor of Bank of Ghana. There's coordination going on, right, towards a common goal and all of that. Then again, from the monetary policy side, you could see the governor in terms of the transparency, even to the extent of publishing minutes of individual MPC members. But of course...
Do me a small favor. Okay. And for our radio audience, Prof, help me. What do you see on the slide? I'm going to scroll this slide. It's very brief. Okay. Go through for us. What do we see?
What I see here is the mid rates, 12.4 Ghana cedis to $1. Yeah.
Scroll, please. Let's go on. Yeah.
And then Cedi had appreciated by 15%. That is what I see here. I think from year to date. Yes, and then there's also a graph that shows the trend in terms of the performance of the Cedi relative to the USD. So you can see some kind of a dip from 16.4 Ghana cedis to 14.4 Ghana cedis. Then it went up to 15.5, stabilized there to some point, and then it took a strengthening to 12.4 as currently we have it. That is what we see on the screen here. I think the emphasis is with respect to the USD.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, I think it's a similar pattern they are showing here from 2020 to 2025 so far, where the Cedi was 2020, and then where we are now at 12.4 to $1. Yeah.
Move on to the next slide. Let me quick about it.
Yes. So here are some reasons why the Cedi is gaining strength, and the reasons here are that gold, cocoa export revenues have gone up.
That's correct.
Yeah. That is verifiable. That is correct. Can we move on to the next one? And then also there's also remittances, which is also playing a role. Can we move on to the next one?
We have had Standard & Poor's who have upgraded the Ghana Cedi, and they have spoken about successful debt restructuring, surge in gold export earnings, strong economic growth outlook, IMF-backed fiscal reforms, and then if we talk about the risk to the Cedi's improved credit ratings, we have fiscal slippages, rising public debt levels, inability to refinance maturing debt, and so on and so forth. So now back to the conversation that we began.
Yes. So there is a reason why the strengthening can be accommodated. And I think the concern also is about the sustainability on this part. So let me talk about why this is happening now. So from the fiscal side, you can see fiscal discipline, you can see expenditure-based fiscal consolidation. So once government is not spending, there isn't considerable injection of liquidity into the economy. And then you have the timing, a favorable timing, in the sense that whilst from the fiscal side we are not spending, we are shrinking the expenditure, which is very good in terms of stabilizing the economy, and I think I support that. You will also see that from the monetary point of view, there's also tightening of monetary policy, because remember the MPC, they increased the policy rate by 100 basis points. Beyond that, there is also a doubling of effort in terms of sterilization, mopping up excess liquidity. So here there's in terms of injection from the expenditure side is constrained. Then there's also the mopping up of excess liquidity from Bank of Ghana point of view. Then you're also looking at the timing of inflows, FX, uptake in terms of gold, cocoa, and then also remittances. So if you look at all of these things, it looks like, okay, this is the time to move into the market and drag the rates down, right? Okay, so the question is, and you remember our economy is very shallow. If you inject $50 million into the economy, it could cause a change. Yes. Okay, so because of the expenditure-based fiscal consolidation, and so far government is not spending. If a government is operating around close to 60% in terms of expenditure, if you check across ministry, department, agencies in terms of expenditure going on, not much.
Government is operating around close to 60%.
Yeah.
I've heard you being quoted at saying that it's operating at 50%. That's not correct.
50 to, close to 60%.
Okay.
Right, and that is verifiable. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Right, so you see the Minister of Energy saying that they need about $1.1 billion to purchase fuel. That will mean injection. Okay, certainly that will not sit well within the consolidation effort that we are doing and all of that. But look at it this way. So, and then because we are not spending, imports is very low. So it means that overall, the economy's cash absorption capacity is restricted and demand is largely subdued. So when you have that situation, with improved FX flows, the central bank has upper hand to come into the market. And once they come, even it doesn't have to be that large. That is enough to cause the strengthening of the local currency. And all of that's what is happening. Now, what is the motive? My suspicion is that the central bank is looking at how to drive down inflation from the point of view of exchange rates. So inflation, what is it basically? Aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply. How do you solve that? You want to look at the demand point of view, eliminate demand-related inflationary pressures, and then you also want to look at the supply side, and that is where I come in. Now, if the consideration is that we can drive down inflation to the target, end-of-year target, and we look at it that we can't get that done from the supply end because the economy's supply capacity is restricted, severely constrained. If that is the approach, then I will not go with the strengthening of the currency the manner they are doing it. Because what you need in that instance is actually go for what we call supply-oriented policies. Supply-oriented policies will not coexist with what we are doing right now. All right, then the other thing you want to look at is that, okay, so we can drive down the inflation. So at a certain exchange rate level, it will help the inflation to come down in terms of the pass-through. Of course, we know that the effect is not contemporaneous. We will not go into that. But this is the issue. From November 2023, inflation on locally produced items is higher than imported inflation. So if you drag down the exchange rate, it only makes import cheaper. Okay, to the extent that we are promoting import-oriented economy, I would say go that, but that's not what we want to do. That strategy does not create jobs. But of course, it will help us to bring inflation down from that point of view. But the real issue is, where should we stabilize the currency? The market has adjusted largely to 15 Ghana cedis to $1 and the rest of them. So if you drag it down, to what point? I believe that the central bank has at the back of their mind a certain exchange rate level that they want to hit and stabilize at that point. That hasn't been communicated to the market. It leaves the market guessing. Okay, and in that itself can cause uncertainty. Disruption in itself is not that good at this level. What the market is looking for is stability. And we need to build our reserves. And I agreed. I heard the first deputy governor of Bank of Ghana saying that they are not burning the reserves.
Yeah.
Yes, and I agree. You know why? Because the fraud level set under the IMF supported program, we had breached that. We had gone beyond that. Even before the election, we had gone beyond that. So there's some kind of margin that we can still intervene in the market without going below that threshold. But something, we've been in this country, and we know that the problem is anytime the Cedi strengthens, it's about the sustainability. The ups and downs is not really good for the market. It's not good for the planning. So I would prefer that once we have favorable effects, the timing is right, we should rather build our reserves that allows predictability for long. And say that in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, we have enough reserves that allows the Cedi to be what? To be stable. And that will be more helpful. But I also see that because we want to bring down inflation, we want exchange rate to come to a certain level which will allow inflation to come down. But that only makes import cheaper. That only makes imported inflation lower than locally produced. And if you look at the data, and I want to believe that going forward, Ghana Statistical Service will be giving us that granular data, because from November 2023, we saw inflation on locally produced rose higher than imported. What that means is that you are far better off in this country if you were importing and paying all the duties at the port rather than producing here. When you do it that way, you are only outsourcing the productive capacity of the economy to foreign or to other countries, and that would not create decent jobs.
I need a very quick thing from you here. A bit of the politics is always important, nonetheless. The minority leader, Afenyo Marking, says the dollar is weakening not because the Cedi is strong, but because investors are losing faith in the greenback itself. So this is not an NDC miracle. It is global monetary turbulence. This is currency recalibration on a planetary scale.
No, I do not subscribe. If I saw it, I didn't have to look at it twice. Clearly, I do not, it doesn't go that way. There's clear policy backing to what you see happening here, a coordination from fiscal side and then also from monetary side. But the reason I'm a bit cautious, and I think here caution is the way to go, I commend the Minister of Finance and Governor of Bank of Ghana in terms of their coordination and stabilizing the country. But something, this is the issue. If you see the 2025 budget, it is not a budget the president can run with the next 2-3 years. You cannot continue to subdue expenditure. You have to have your signature on projects and interventions in the market. So far, what they have done, you will see, is that they are launching policies. You launch a Jumera. That's not the same as achievement, because you launch this policy and like that. That is good. At the policy level, that is fine. You now have to back that with real cash flow, disbursement. And that is where you see the economy now responding. So when you put the economy in full swing, right, or every aspect of the economy is working optimally, and you see your currency still strengthening, then you can say that is sustainable. But to the extent that you constrain expenditure, and the president himself said that they've trimmed expenditure considerably, you can't continue to trim expenditure this way into 2027, 2028. You know why? Because if you look at your debt servicing obligations that picked up from there, and then also, this is you can correct me, the president can only do 4 years. In the next 2 years, there will be considerable pressure on the government to begin to do projects. That involves spending.
Right.
So, and you are talking about big push. You launch it. You are talking about $10 billion. That is injection. Then you also, so once import picks up, and the demands, and you calibrate all the variables into it, now you begin to see that there will be pressure on the currency.
All right.
And that is why it's important that we are a bit more conscious, because the timing, the inflows are all favorable, so that we build reserves. And then the other thing we need to talk about is that how do we consciously move away from this environmentally destructive growth model? And here, what am I talking about? So we've seen gold for reserves playing a role, gold export and the rest of them. To what extent can the central bank and the stakeholders assure us that the gold they are buying in terms of gold for reserves and the rest of them is from responsible miners? So that as we put considerable pressure on the government to deal with irresponsible mining and all of that, it doesn't affect this gold for reserves and the rest of them, because I'm concerned. Any policy, any intervention that causes considerable destruction to the environment in the name of getting more gold and the rest, it's not sustainable. Because at the end of the day, it will come back to bite.
I'll ask, begin by asking Ken Thompson whether Isaac Adongo is right when he says that we have not arrested the Cedi. What is happening to the Cedi now is that we are gradually massaging it to find its true level. Listening to Prof Bopkin, he suggests to me that he says emphatic, this is not a blip, and so don't think it's a temporary something, but he's not too sure it will last for so long. But he agrees, he suggests that this is, deliberate. But I have a sense that the deliberateness appears to be something that, is artificial. So I would like Ken Thompson to speak to me about that. But briefly, I wanted you to respond to this. When Isaac Adongo says that you should not be taking dollars over the counter, is he saying something wrong? Is that not a good thing to pursue?
There has to be some kind of coordination and communication to the markets. That would unsettle the market. Remember that even if we say you want to operate from Ghana domestically, even for inputs, raw materials, a lot of things, we still import them. So to say that you can't, look, and something we've been
it's over the counter. Yes. He cannot say that. He didn't say that you can't keep your dollars in the bank and trade with your dollars. And as we understand, FX accounts are supposed to be a trade product, specifically to support external trade. And we understand that in every well-functioning economy everywhere in the world, this is what it is. In China, you cannot operate a retail forex account. In US, it is banned. In UK, it is banned. Singapore, the Nordics, every sane place, because the whole idea of a central bank is predicted on that. So, and this is Aku Kwapong, who is, summarizing. Yes. And people say, Adongo is saying the right thing. In the face of the laws we also have.
Yes,
but we seem to suggest that
we have been there before. We need to appreciate where we are, and then a certain gradual approach. Yep. Already, look, everybody prefers relative certainty. Already, with what is happening, there's this disruption. Look, this is second quarter. People have done their budget, and the rest of them. So it's only the central bank right now that knows where they want to push the Cedi to. It's only the central bank. But remember that the exchange rate is not only a variable for central bank. People plan with it. Banks, people have taken positions and all of that. So you don't do anything that will cause disruptions, because how the market will react.
So it can be done long term, but not now.
Gradually.
Okay.
Gradually. I believe that it is possible that with proper policy coordination and management, the idea of people holding dollar also as a store of value and all of that can easily go down.
It's okay. So quickly, let me go to Ken Thompson. And I think I should start with Ken Thompson on that point.